And our first speaker is Sebastian Feller. He's going to talk us about the WhatsApp protocol for backup encryption. And he's going to tell us about the new analysis, security analysis.
Thanks for the introduction. Yeah, this was joint work with Gareth Davies, Helga Latt, Tobias Handirk, Julia Hesse, Matej Horvath, and Tibor Jung. So if you recently opened your WhatsApp application on the phone, I'm not going to ask who's using WhatsApp in the room, then you might have seen in your menu this button here that says end-to-end encrypted backup. And by default, it's disabled. But if you want to, you can enable it after the talk. Maybe you want to do that. So the thing is, if you press on it, WhatsApp even gives you a short explanation what they mean by that. And it says that the backup is end-to-end encrypted. And no one, not even Google, who's like the cloud provider in my case, or WhatsApp, can access my backups if I enable this feature. So in my case, it's Google because I have an Android phone, but if you have an iPhone, it would be your iCloud. So according to WhatsApp, this end-to-end encrypted protocol is already used by 100 million users. And naturally, if you're a cryptographer and you see such a claim, like no one can access it, and there's a lot of people using it, then you're interested in how does this actually work? And this is exactly what we did in our paper. So we had a look at the inner workings of the protocol behind this menu. Before I'm going to show you what WhatsApp did, I'd like to discuss in general how you could store chat histories securely and what could go wrong, because then we better understand why WhatsApp came up with their solution. So the setting in which we are is that we have a client device and there's some chat history on the device. And now our client device chooses some random key and wants to encrypt our chat history with the key and then sends encrypted back up to our cloud provider. Then the key is stored because our chat history changes from time to time. And so let's say every 4 weeks, you want to re-encrypt your chat history and sort of send a new backup to your cloud provider. So you need the key regularly. The problem is when your device gets lost and the key is just stored on the device, losing your device means losing your whole chat history. And that is a situation where you don't want to end up. So WhatsApp gives us a hint in the screenshot that I showed you. So they say they solved this somehow using passwords. So like, this is the interface that you see when you press on enabling this. So let's try the most naive thing we can come up with. So we just hash a password and interpret the output as our encryption key. This might look good because if we lose the device, we can just re-enter the password into the hash function and we get back the same key. However, there's the problem that now the cloud provider, so Google or Apple, is able to just guess the password because then they can enter it into the hash function and decrypt our chat history. And like guessing passwords is a real problem. Like just to illustrate it, if you have 100 million users of the protocol, and let's say 80% of them use weak passwords. I don't know if that's accurate. It's just made up to illustrate the problem. Now the cloud provider guesses 100 passwords every time, then like the chance is good that you get 8 million backup keys, and that's roughly the population of Switzerland. So you really want to prevent password guessing attacks. So one thing you could think about is, okay, then we strip that away with the passwords and we store the key at some other place. And the natural point to do that would be the WhatsApp server, because like you have two servers in the scenario, the backup server and the WhatsApp server. And indeed, this is how WhatsApp used to store the backups before 2021. However, there's still a problem with this approach. And that is the possibility to collude. Namely, if WhatsApp just hands over your key that it knows in the plane to Google or Apple, they are able to decrypt. Why would WhatsApp collude with a cloud provider? For example, because they have to. Like if there's a federal search warrant against you, they're forced by law. So the question is like, then this is not really true that no one, not even Google or WhatsApp, can access it. We want a system where we sort of have both of best worlds. So we don't want that WhatsApp knows our backup key in the clear, but we also don't want the cloud provider to have the backup key in the clear, but we still somehow want to be able to get back the backups just by remembering the password. And sort of the idea that WhatsApp came up with was, why not use password-based cryptography to solve this problem? And the core building blocks sort of that they used is a protocol called OPAKE. If you were in Hugo Kravchik's talk this morning, you heard of it. It's a password-authenticated key exchange, namely asymmetric password-authenticated key exchange. That means you have a client on the left side that has some password, and you have a server on the right side that has some sort of a key. And then you have two phases. First, you want to initialize the protocol, and later you want to be able to do key exchanges. So in the initialization phase, what happens is more or less that you establish a file at the client, at the server. And this file, you can sort of think of it as being the hash of the password. It's not exactly that, but it's morally something like that. It's something that depends on the password, but does not tell the password to the server. And the client ends up with something that's called the export key. And this is more or less the output of oblivious pseudorandom function of the password using the seed. Or if you don't know what that is, think of it as something that depends on the password and the seed. And when you initialize this file at the server side, you can then go ahead and do key exchanges. And for that, your client would re-enter the password. And in the end, both parties end up with a shared session key. And sort of the guarantee that you get is that if the password that you entered was correct, so matched the password that was used to create the file, then the shared keys of both parties will be the same. But also the export key that the client gets in the key exchange phase is the same export key that you had in the initialization phase. All right. I'd like to highlight at this point that the server does not see the password in the clear, which is a really cool feature that distinguishes OPAKE from other protocols like the classical hash and salt approach, where you would send the password to the server computes a hash with salt. This is not the case in OPAKE. All right. So how is OPAKE used by WhatsApp to store the key? So again, there will be two phases. One phase where you store something at the server, and then the phase where you can retrieve that later. So in the first phase, the client and WhatsApp perform the OPAKE initialization protocol, which means the WhatsApp server will end up with some file, and your client will end up with some export key. Then this export key, the green one, is used as a key using a symmetric cipher to encrypt the backup key. And then you end up with this value C that encrypts your backup key that you want to protect. And this is being sent to WhatsApp, and WhatsApp stores this encrypted version of your backup key. If you want to get your backup key back, you can do the following. The client, again, performs OPAKE with WhatsApp, but this time the key exchange phase, meaning both parties will end up with a shared key, and your client gets, again, an export key. And because, like, hopefully your password matched, you can use the shared key to encrypt the value C that you stored at WhatsApp. That is being sent to you. And then your client knows the two keys that are necessary to unwrap those two layers of encryption and getting back your backup key. At this point, you might ask yourself, like, wasn't the whole point to prevent password guessing attacks? But they're still possible, right? Like, the only thing that authenticates the client here is the password. So the server can just play the protocol with himself and just choose an arbitrary password and see if everything works out. And to prevent that, here, it's also on the slides. To prevent that, WhatsApp introduced another party into the picture, which is a hardware security module. So hardware security module is a piece of hardware that has some extra layers of protection, like to prevent all sorts of side channel attacks. And it can only be programmed if you have some physical programming part. And if that card is destroyed, you cannot reprogram it anymore. And now the idea is that the whole server part of OPAKE is shifted to the HSM. And for the sake of the analysis in our paper, we assumed the HSM to be completely trusted. There's an additional feature of the HSM, and that is a counter. So OPAKE has an explicit key confirmation step. That means the server learns if the key exchange was successful or not. And if the key exchange was not successful, the HSM would increase the counter once. And if the counter reaches some threshold, which is 10, then it just destroys the record of the client. So you're not able to retrieve your chat history anymore. So intuitively, what would we as WhatsApp users want from such a product? We would want that the key is somehow verifiable. So we know it's really the key that we used before, so that we don't use some different key to encrypt our new backups when we switch our phone. We also want that the key is of high entropy, meaning WhatsApp is not able to make us using weak keys. And we also want that the backup key is secret, and it should be secret from the cloud provider and secret towards WhatsApp. And also that there's a hard limit on the attempts of password guesses that a malicious WhatsApp server has. And what our work showed was the first three properties are satisfied, but there is a problem with the last property. And I'm going to talk the rest of the time about this. So there is a way to get more than 10 guesses if you're a malicious WhatsApp server. And this can happen whenever you change your password. Password changing works as follows. Your client device tells the WhatsApp server, hey, can you please change the password? And then two things happen. First, the WhatsApp server tells the HSM, please delete the old record of that client. And the HSM is trusted, so that will happen. And in particular, this will delete the counter that's associated with your record. Then in the second step, you would just do reinitialization with the HSM. That means the result of this process is that the HSM ends up with a new record that corresponds to the new password, and it will have a fresh counter. So you still have 10 guesses left. The problem is that your client device is authenticated to the WhatsApp server. This is done out of band by using some SMS authentication once you install WhatsApp. But this authentication ends at the WhatsApp server. So the WhatsApp server always knows if it's talking to you or to someone else, but the HSM doesn't know that. So a malicious WhatsApp server could just lie towards the HSM. And it also can just suppress messages. So what does stop the WhatsApp server from just saying, oh, I keep forgetting this, delete the old record message, and just go straight into initializing a new record? Nothing. Like the server can just do that. And the result is that the HSM will, every time you change your password, make a new record with a fresh counter. So the result is that a malicious WhatsApp server could guess any of your old passwords to get back your backup key. However, I have to say at this point that this is only dangerous if one of your old passwords can be guessed within 10 guesses. So probably if you distrust WhatsApp and you used to have a very short PIN, like, I don't know, 4 numbers for whatever reasons, and then you say, okay, I want to change to something harder, then it might be a problem. But when you chose good passwords from the beginning, this attack won't affect you. And anyways, you have to assume that the WhatsApp server is malicious. All right. So let me wrap up for you. We confirm very strong guarantees of the WhatsApp end-to-end encrypted chat protocol. Like, it has a lot of strengths. However, if the WhatsApp server is malicious, there is a way for the server to get more than 10 guesses in your password. We would still say that it's a good protocol and a good approach. What's left for future work are several points. Like I said in the beginning that we assumed the HSM to be a completely trusted party. But if you think about it, if the HSM is completely trusted, there's not really a point in using opaque, because opaque also protects your password by using this opaque password file. So it would be interesting to see how strong the protocol is when you assume HSM corruption. Another interesting direction for research would be how could you optimize the protocol, like in terms of efficiency. How can you really achieve this hard limit on password guesses? And also, how would you implement this protocol efficiently in a post-quantum world? The last point that I'd like to put on the slides is, if you're into implementations, I recommend you to check out those two GitHub repositories. This is not the full code of the end-to-end encrypted backup protocol, but WhatsApp published parts of it, namely the OPRF and the opaque implementation. It's Rust implementation, so they're good to check out. So thanks for your attention. Feel free to ask questions.
Thank you, Sebastian. We have plenty of time for questions. We have about 10 minutes. So do we have any question from the audience? And if you have a question, could you come here at the mic?
The HSM typically have a lot of limited quantity of storage, and the standard practice when you store hundreds of millions of users of is the HSM encrypts them and stores them. So if you have a malicious server, then presumably you can evolve that part of the server, and that would be completely unlimited.
It's true that the HSM has a very limited memory, and WhatsApp does exactly what you say, like they outsource parts of the storage onto the server. And there is a mechanism to prevent rollback attacks. They have a construction using Merkle trees, but we did not analyze that in the scope of our paper. So it's a good point. I should have added that to future work.
Well, if I recall correctly, opaque allows you to separate off the OPRF specifically to keep the server from being able to brute force the passwords. Have you looked at that, or am I misremembering that part of the specification?
Could you clarify what you mean by separating off?
By having the step where the client transforms the password into the salt used for the actual authenticated key exchange, which happens with the oblivious PRF, that could be moved off to a secondary server that doesn't need to be the main one that does the password authentication, in which case you would end up with three parties. You'd have WhatsApp, you'd have the cloud storage, and then you'd have the OPRF server, and that would also prevent the attack, if I remember correctly, or at least the password reinforcing issue.
Yeah, I think that is true, but we haven't looked into it.
Okay.
Like it makes sense to outsource parts. You could also think about scenarios, for example, where you want to rather use something like password protected secret sharing for this problem. If you really have two servers and you assume that they don't pollute, yeah, then optimizations are possible.
Thank you.
Since we have time. We have plenty of time. So, while we, so I was a little bit confused about the 10 attempts. So normally, there are already 10 attempts available for the server.
Yeah.
And your attack shows that you can increase the number of attempts for the server. But it's by creating new records. If you create new records, you need to create them with new passwords.
Yes.
So in which way, I think I got lost there.
Yeah, so so you still only have, like, if the user uses different passwords every time, then you still only have 10 guesses on each of the passwords. but the backup key will always be the same. Like every record will encode the same backup key, because else you would have to re-encrypt your whole chat history. So the orange key is the same. And for, like, let's say for password 1, WhatsApp uses all their 10 guesses, but it wasn't a match. Then they try guessing password 2, then they continue to guess password 3. That would be the attack. And
So the orange key is independent of this.
yes, yeah.
Okay, that makes- Do you have any more questions?
Maybe it's not meant to be, but if we, HSM, not like, and the subserver of HSM unique record, then we create the same record with WB1.
No, like what I showed you is really simplified, and there are nonces and all that to prevent, like, so your idea would be to sort of store this change password message at the server, and then the server would just resend it several times. I don't think that's possible because of like details that are in the time.
Or like cipher all stuff, and the buttons
I mean, like, for example, if you think about like the initialization needs an OPRF execution. So your client would choose some random value and then compute something like hash of X to the R and send that to the HSM. The HSM will compute that to the K and send it back. And if you sort of replay that, but the server doesn't know the R, then it's not able to sort of send the second flow in a consistent way.
Right, so we have 3 minutes left. So I guess the last question. So this is an authentication problem with the HSM, right?
Yeah.
And so is there a way for, do you think there's a way that can be fixed just by enforcing some authentication from the client directly?
Yeah, this is also an interesting question. If you're willing to change the protocol, there would be ways. For example, you could think of something like the client also sends its or hashes its phone number into something, and then the HSM also puts that into some hash or something like that. But the problem is, whatever code change you implement would mean that WhatsApp has to buy all their HSM new, because you can only program them if you have the programming cards, and WhatsApp claims that they destroyed them. So there's no way to change it except buying new ones.
All right, thank you so much, Sebastian.
The clicker.
Right, our next speaker is Håkon Jacobson, and he's going to tell us about the optimal tightness of key exchange protocol with full forward secrecy.
Thank you. So this is joint work with Kai Gillard, Christian Yusuf, and Thibaut Lager.
So essentially looking at a fairly simple way of upgrading security of certain key exchange protocol from one security level to the next, which is ensure the minimum sounds sure. Price it had a so to set the stage, we want to implicitly authentic stock. The fairly simple authentication. We will also have some long-term keys. So Alice and Bob are also long-term keys to use. And they exchange into the sheet Y, and then they derive their session key as some combination of all those secret keys that they have. So they have like some ephemeral combination from the static. You might recognize this as some kind of noise pattern if you're familiar with that. The dots here just indicates that there might be other stuff going into this hash, like their identities and whatnot, basically hashing in here. And kind of the standard security property that you want from a key exchange like this is that essentially the session key should be known by the other adversary should be able to learn this key. We phrase that as these keys being distinguishable from random. This key exchange program does have that property, and in fact, it has a little bit more properties than that. And one of them being weak or secrecy, which is the property that even if the long-term keys of Alice are revealed at some point later, the adversary still can't go back and learn the session key because, well, it doesn't know due to the XG3Y. But for this particular protocol, and the reason why I'm using the lead here is that it comes with a little bit of this restriction. And that's that the adversary can't actually be the one that creates these G to the X and G to the X. And it shouldn't be too hard to see why, because if, say, the adversary created G to the X, then later has to get Alice's long-term key, then basically the adversary has everything that Alice had at some point. It can then trivially get this session key. So this is, in some sense, a fundamental limitation of this implicitly authenticated key chain. The question is, can we get rid of that restriction and upgrade to maybe typically just call for secrecy or full for secrecy, you know? And so is there any way of doing that? And well, basically the standard approach for that is some rise in actually start using the session key books that these tags are valid. So for instance, Alice would upon receiving T.
Okay, can you try?
Oh yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Start it up here. Is that better?
I think so, but let's see.
Yeah, just let me know. Is it better? Yeah.
I think it's better.
Okay, good. Yeah, so they will verify these before actually start using this session. And this is a very straightforward approach, and it's used all over the place. And in some sense, this is also going on inside this same protocol that you project. And then, so for further reference, let me just call this initial Diffie-Hellman protocol for pi, and the key confirmation extended version for pi plus. And we're going to be interested in the security properties that we have for pi plus. And of course, it immediately inherits weak for secrecy property from pi. The question is, can it get more? And in fact, it does. So we do get rid of this. And this is a standard way of upgrading security from weak for secrecy to full for secrecy by adding these conditions. So more formally, we have like the intuitive result like this. So for any, or in this case, the particular part of the element up here, we can bound the security of the pi plus protocol in terms of the underlying protocol pi, and kind of the reduction idea is as follows. By the security of pi, we can replace all those session keys that comes out with random keys. And if we now just for simplicity, we assume that the keys that comes out of pi is both the session key and the tags, then by the security property of the key exchange protocol, we can replace all of those with random tags. So that gives us kind of that part here. So by that security, we can replace session keys and tags with random values. But from that point on, getting a session to actually accept the key is now just a numbers game. Like it's information theoretically based on the length of the tags. So now you're essentially just left with guessing a tag versus a session. So that's sort of the intuitive result. Flip all the session keys to random, you're allowed to do that by security pi, and then you're just left with these random tags that the answer guess. Okay, so that's the intuitive result. And that's essentially what basically most of the same authors of this paper as another paper from Crypto 19 said. So we said, okay, yeah, we can do this. And moreover, we had another result in that 19 paper saying that for this particular protocol using Diffie-Hellman, we can then go from authenticating weak for secrecy down to the strong Diffie-Hellman assumption. So, and with that, we would have to actually get a loss of the number of users. Here use like the number, you can think of the number of long-term keys in the system. We show that we can get rid of that U, but at least we hope, or claim at least, that this part would be tight. So the overall step, starting with kind of like the bottom assumption being the strong Diffie-Hellman assumption, we can reach full for secrecy with a loss, overall loss of U. Unfortunately, it turned out that was wrong. So there's a flaw in this proof, which I will come back to. And just a caveat for the rest, I simplified all of these bounds, like suppressed all the constants that doesn't really matter, just set them to 1. So these aren't technically 100% correct, but I've looked at the paper for the really correct statement, but this is the idea. So let me just show you kind of the problem in this reduction. And this is basically a classic problem that's been known already. I know that you Krauchik pointed this out. This was pointed out by Lara and Rugway a long time ago. So the idea is, again, the intuition is we have an adversary against pi plus. We want to reduce that to security of pi. And this reduction would then take all session keys for fresh sessions and replace them with random keys. But now what happens if the adversaries start by picking G to the X themselves? Well, now the reduction will have to simulate the G to the Y. Well, that part is simple. You can just forward this underlying gain, so we can just get that for free. The question now, how should it simulate the tag that comes from Bob? Well, at this point, even though the adversary created G to the X, it hasn't actually revealed the long-term key. So from that point of view, Bob is fresh. And by the strategy we talked about, at this point, the reduction should now make a test predicate, kind of get this is a valid target, so to speak. So it makes a test query, which gives them either a real key or a random key. And to remind you, the keys here for pi are actually the combination of the session key and the tags. So making this test query, the reduction gets back either some random tags or some real tags, and kind of makes that its simulation. But now what happens is that the adversary, the underlying adversary, makes a reveal against Alice's long-term key. And at this point, Bob goes from being fresh to unfresh. And at this point, the reduction is basically stopped. Because here, the reduction already committed to testing the session. So he hopes to actually be able to exploit the session somehow by making this test. But now it's suddenly become unfresh, and he kind of lost the game. So at this point, the reduction is stopped. And this is the flaw of the proof. So again, the overall idea of the Crypto 19 paper was to, in some sense, start from the strong Diffie-Hellman assumption and end up at full for secrecy, and doing so with the two basic steps. First, by showing that you can obtain weak for secrecy, which they showed we show that we can do with a loss of U. Then the claim was that we can take the final step, this intuitive step, by key confirmation tightening. But unfortunately, as we just showed, that's not the case. Now, this can be like, you can still get this part, but you actually do get a hit of U here as well. So you can prove go from here to here, but you would have to actually lose another step here to fix this argument as is, which means that the overall tightness loss will be quadratic in the number of users, which is not what we want, or at least what we claim to have. This is where the current paper comes in. So again, the goal is to go from strong to Hellman for secrecy. The thing we're going to do now is slicing the pie slightly differently. So we're going to make the cut somewhere down here. So we're going to set our aims a little bit lower for the first part by going for a slightly different security notion, which we call a selective security. So we're going to achieve weak for secrecy, but a selective variant of it. And it's basically that in this game, the adversary has to commit at the start of the game one long-term key that it can't reveal. So you kind of get rid of that part. And we showed, so intuitively, that means that there's less to do here, but more to do here. Unfortunately, we show that we can still get rid of, or we can still go from here to here with a tightness loss of U. But now with this simpler security notion here, we can actually achieve that tightly from the strong Hellman assumption. So overall, we actually do end up with a loss of U, which was the goal to begin with. So more formally, this is basically our result. So for any generic vertical pi here, which achieves some kind of implicit weak for security, by adding key confirmation tags, we can kind of reduce it down. We can obtain full secrecy with the security loss of U. And now plugging in the concrete protocol from 19, we can essentially reestablish the result. And then, as we said, this part we can obtain tightly. Now we're back to what was originally. So that was our first part. The next question then is, can we do better? Like, okay, so we have U, is there some way of even getting beyond this result? And unfortunately, so that's our second result. Getting better than that is impossible. So for this, we have like a meta reduction. So let me clear what I mean by that. The idea here is that suppose we have any adversary against pi plus, for example, the key confirmation tags, and then assume we have some reduction which is tight, that doesn't lose any factor, from this adversary A against pi plus to pi. So now the thing we're interested in talking about is this. Can we say something meaningful about this advantage here from this reduction? Well, we show that if we had such a tight reduction, then we could create another reduction V, or a meta reduction, if you will, to pi, which has the following relationship. So we essentially showing here that we can get this B from this reduction minus another term 1 over U here. Again, this number of U is the number of long-term keys here. Okay, so I'm gonna try to interpret this result somewhat. So what this is essentially saying is that if the reduction is doing better, significantly better than 1 over U, then this whole part here is significant, basically. So then we have an attack against this protocol. But if we assume that this actually is secure in the weak for security sense, well, then this part here can't be much better than 1 over U. Then they better be close, or actually, at least it can't be better than. So that's the intuition. So what we will also show, as is common for these meta reduction, is that we can create an adversary A, which has basically a hypothetical one, that is basically advantage 1. It won't be efficient. The point is that this reduction here is supposed to work for all adversaries. So we'll create an adversary A that has advantage close to 1. We've shown that this part can't be much better than 1 over U, which means that there has to be a factor loss here somewhere. It has to be at least U. So because this part will show can achieve advantage close to hypothetical. Yeah, I'll try to illustrate this with a kind of go through the proof a little bit. So again, the idea is that we have an adversary A plus. This is going to be a hypothetical. There's a way to show that we can actually simulate this hypothetical adversary just to a certain degree, visually sufficient. And this A adversary is playing against pi plus, as we have in this case 5 users, and the reduction R around it. I tried to illustrate with different colors here. I tried to be consistent, but so the pluses here is in a different color, so which is sort of to indicate that the reduction's job is to simulate the cyan part here, right? So it has to simulate these tags somehow. And the intuition is to set up kind of like a communication graph like this, where user A talks to user 2, and they're going to set up a session, and user 2 is talking to user 3, they're going to set up a session, and so on and so forth. And this, by creating all these G to the X, that kind of forces the reduction to respond. So we will have to create the G to the Y's, and in particular, we'll have to create these tags, that sign tags. This is kind of the setup. And now what we're basically going to do is we're going to do the problem attack that we saw earlier, which is going to do it for every single place. So we're going to have the adversary create all these G to the X's, which means that none of these sessions here, so for instance, you two will not have a partner in the sense of kind of the security game, because the G to the X is not coming from U1, it's actually coming from the adversary. It's still at the point when U2 receives that, they're all fresh, which means that reduction at this point is his can you hear me? Okay, so this is in some sense just running the same problem attack from earlier many times over, and forcing the hands of the reduction. So at this point, the reduction will be committed to all these tags. What the adversary is going to do now, A, is going to ask to reveal all but one of the parties, with one party being slightly random. So at this point, the reduction will have to also make its own reveal queries to its own game for all these long-term keys. And what the adversary will do here is when he gets all these long-term keys, we'll check that reduction here is not fooling around. We'll check that all these long-term keys are correct. Once it has all these long-term keys, it can also derive all the session keys, because those are derived deterministically from the long-term keys, and G to the X to Y them. The adversary created those G to the X. So the adversary will also check that all the tags are correct. And if any of those are wrong, it will abort. And here comes kind of the funny part about these meta reductions. Now for the final user that the adversary A didn't actually reveal the long-term key of, we'll just compute the long-term key somehow. We don't care how, like, this is not supposed to be possible, of course, but for someone who's computationally unbounded, you can do that. But the point is the reduction is supposed to work no matter what this adversary does. So this adversary here now can compute this long-term key. Now the adversary A is in a position where it has all the long-term keys, and in particular, it has the long-term keys responding to the session between U5 and U4. So it created G to the X itself. It has received G to the Y and T, and now we can kind of complete the protocol since it has the long-term key of the user 4, complete this session here. Now U5 is complete. It will derive its own session key. And at this point, adversary A can test it, get a key, and kind of make a guess. And at this point, it knows everything, so it will then probably with advantage close to. Okay. So far, so I don't know if this is understandable at all, but the point is, at this point, we've kind of tricked or painted the reduction R into a point. Because when the adversary made all those G to the X's, but before it actually made the reveal calls, the adversary, the reduction didn't know which one of these would be left kind of unrevealed. So the only way that the reduction, at least in 2 degree, would be able to kind of simulate all these long-term keys, would have to be able to guess, because you would have to leave one of these
sessions fresh, like for yourself to be able to do this. Okay, but this is not the full picture because this is a hypothetical adversary. Because I'm running, probably more than this time. But what we show is that around this, we can now create an actual adversary, an efficient adversary, the meta reduction. The meta reduction will simulate A inside. So B will run an instance in R where it simulates the behavior of A. And on this slide here, B can efficiently do all of those parts. Everything in blue, B can do. But the part in red here can't really do efficiently. It will show that it can mostly do all of it except some failure code. And that failure code is exactly that one that we need. So the only part that it can't do, it will only fail with the and we leave it with that. The point is, B can simulate all of those parts. And unless something goes wrong, it will either be able to win its own game or call out reduction in a failure. So we're just going to end with some of the implicit assumptions that I made during this reduction in this actually work. So there's some assumptions that we made on both the protocol and the behavior of these reductions. That was, first of all the messages in pi are independent of the long-term key. So for the helmet variant that's clear, we can create them. But a protocol where that is not the case is, for instance, signed with the helmet. Where you can't really do the same. So though there are protocol messages in. Second, we have to assume that the long-term keys can be efficiently checked. Because again, B or A, once it makes the long-term key query, it will check that these are actually correct keys it gets back from the block. We also assume that R is black box. So we can do details of that, and also these key confirmation tags essentially preserve the entropy of the keys. Okay, I think we're going to leave it with that. And thank you.
Thank you, Håkon, for this talk. Do we have any questions in the room?
Hi, thanks for the great talk. So the impossibility is that you can't get a tight reduction to the weak for secret AKE, or
No. So okay, let me go back. So the claim is that even this is not even this is probably this is better. So what the claim is saying is that we show that this is the case. This you can achieve. You can't get rid of that loop. So you can't obtain full for secrecy. Actually, that's also see everything in reverse. This is not the case. So this is wrong. You can't do this.
okay.
So there has to be.
So does this also disclude the possibility that there's a strong, is that also true for strong Diffie-Hellman? Can you replace that weak AKE WFS with strong Diffie-Hellman there and still get this?
Yeah, so basically, that's what we do, right? So we meant for this protocol, we show that you can establish weak for secrecy from the strong Diffie-Hellman solution. And that also comes with a commentary of view. The point is that there should be another U here, which means with new square.
Okay, so I don't know much about meta reduction, but so it means that there's no smart reduction to this directly to the strong Diffie-Hellman assumption. So right now, like you're going through this weak for secret AKE, and you would,
Yeah.
Is there a way to directly go to strong Diffie-Hellman and have a tight reduction?
Oh, okay, I see. Probably not, because that would was already established in 2019 that that's another meta reduction that we can't get rid of that unit,
Ah, okay.
right? So if you could get rid of that, then basically you have certainly with that impossibility as well.
Okay.
You go straight from here to here, then of course then you also have veto secrecy, which means that then you can certainly this loss, which you can't.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions? I thank you for the talk. Can you go back to slide 12?
Well, okay, so slides this.
Just the last one before the page. I was just curious about how this proof worked.
Yep.
Did you see that the reduction key can actually compute the long-term key with probability 1?
Yeah, so B can compute this one.
Can or cannot?
It cannot.
Not even with probability 1.
No.
Okay.
But the point is that B doesn't actually. So the thing B cares about is not actually obtaining long-term keys. The thing B cares about is producing those keys. That can. So we show. So you have to look at the details for that. I'm happy to talk about that. But the point is that bound by some bad events, we show that the reduction R will either have to make some real queries or some test queries that will basically leak the session key coming out of pi. So there's no pi on this slide here, but so the session key will leak out. That's what B needs in order to kind of simulate these T's and T lines. So it's not. So B will not be able to complete this knowledge. There's also a probability that B fails. We show that the probability of B failing is upper bound.
I think the technical piece was that you said that the reduction has to work for like against any adversary.
Yes,
But
yeah, this reduction has to work.
But
But
not
the
if-
RB doesn't have.
But does R really have to work against unbound adversaries? Because normally a reduction is required to be sound, like simulations will be required to be sound.
Right.
Restricted.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I guess that sometimes can happen. Sure, much easier, but in terms of queries, like this A, R needs to respond to these queries from A, no matter how they create whatever A does. R will have to respond precisely. It's a matter of how much A used to.
Maybe I'll ask them. Thank you very much. Thank you, Hakon. Thank you to all the speakers of this session. We're gonna take 3 minutes off for switching track.